Travis Wayne Goodsell. I can't remember if it was May of 2018 or May of 2019 when the state of Utah created discriminatory categorizations beyond the federal requirements. And in so they re-emphasized non-discrimination against religion. And I remember doing the videos back then warning of that kind of thinking process, that if you start categorizing people, segregating groups to distinguish them in order to protect them over others, that you're going to have to then have an eternal list as new categories are created on a regular basis. But we'll divert the conversation now to give you some personal real-life examples. As a born and raised Mormon in a white supremacist Nazi Mormon family, I wanted nothing to do with it and looked forward to going to Rick's College. And then I did the video where I told you that it was Tricia Wingate who took me to her bishop to interview me for a mission and to get rid of me. And thus the mission, okay, I'm still away from my parents, they're paying for all of it, great. Came back from my mission, immediately went right back up to Rick's. And in that same video I talked about how I passed up on Leanne Murdoch. And so this is part 2, I guess, to get to the main point of the video. I then married Stephanie, and she was a half-breed, half American, half Canadian. As Mormon with Mormon parents, she had a dad who was Canadian and a mom who was American. They met at BYU, got married, had sex, had her in the Provo hospital. So she's American, but they decided to take the family after he graduated to Canada, where Stephanie got dual citizenship along with her siblings thereafter. And so I then met her at Rick's as she came down to Rick's instead of BYU. And so when we got married, she wanted to do a role reversal to have us and our family go up to Canada like her parents did with her, as Melissa was on the way. And mostly it was because it would be a cheaper existence. If we were to have Melissa here in the States, we'd then have to pay to have children, whereas in Canada we get babies for free up there. And they're just so cute. You just get to pick and choose which one. But I still had to provide a living, as the free money from Canada wasn't sufficient enough to take care of a family. And so I was looking for all types of work and only had a what was called a permanent resident status. It wasn't an immigration status or a citizenship status or a dual citizenship status, and so that created a disadvantage for me, but allowed me to at least get a job and be able to get paid for it. But I still had to do all sorts of part-time labor because it the jobs were scarce in Lethbridge, especially in Alberta, as even though it was a college town, jobs were lacking in that regard. But I did manage to get involved in the manager trainee program at McDonald's. McDonald's at that time that I was there had two restaurants. One that was just across the bridge from the university, and the other at the entrance exit there in Lethbridge towards going home. And since then, the school closed down as they tore it all down and have rebuilt it. It's supposedly rebuilt now. I haven't checked Google Maps to see if it's been remodeled, but last I checked, it was gone. I was going, holy crap, where'd it go? My school is gone. But I also noticed that the McDonald's locations were also gone, and they took over the Burger King that was in the middle at the squared section of Lethbridge there. And the hotel that I worked was also gone, and the Denny's restaurant that I have told you about previously. The manager trainee program, I would go to the main store across the bridge from Lethbridge, and I would be involved in going through the manuals and taking tests, learning all the positions in McDonald's. So burger flipper, fryer, cashier, all of those jobs, and learning temperatures and all that stuff. There was one guy that was going through the program with us who had worked at Blockbuster. He'd done all those things. He knew it all and was the star of the show. But me, I'd never worked at McDonald's before, and so I'm learning all this for the first time. And then I had passed all those initial tests for burger flipper and all that, and so now it was time to train me as a manager. And what they did was sent me out to the other one on the other side of town that was closer to Alberta, or not Alberta, McGrath, so it'll be a quicker travel for me. But I went out there and was introduced around, and immediately I got separated from the other managers, as the employees were letting me know very clearly they didn't like my kind. They had worked there at McDonald's for years, and now all of a sudden McDonald's is doing a manager trainee program with people who've never even worked at McDonald's. They were not raising people from within, they were bringing outsiders to take their jobs. And so that first introduction was kind of yikes. And so the manager that was already there at that place, who was supposed to be the one to train me, told me to come back on the such and such day, and she would start me off with my training. So I show up that morning, and there was snow all over the road. If you're unfamiliar with Alberta, Lethbridge was the original town, and they had their, I guess there was a brewery and some other stuff there in the town to keep it going. And then the Mormons came into town. And they didn't take too kindly to Mormons. And so Lethbridge passed a law saying that Mormons are not allowed in the township within a certain kilometers, because they don't do feet and miles. and so that's why you have in Alberta these pocket cities around Lethbridge, is because the Mormons weren't allowed in Lethbridge. That's changed over time. Mormons are now allowed in Lethbridge. But there was some high animosity towards Mormons when they first got there. But my first day at work, big old snowstorm. And I had my new wife's vehicle that she was able to have, which was a Dodge Colt. Tiny little thing. I was still able to fit in it, and it was a stick shift. Not a big deal. My dad provided me with a Toyota pickup truck, which was stick shift, so I knew how to drive stick. And so there I was in this little tiny car in deep snow, in a blizzard, trying to get to work for the first day, learning how to train as a manager. And a semi-truck came driving by, sped up rather than slowing down, and thus the wind gust was trying to knock me off the road. That was fun. But I made it through the snow and kept myself protected. Little Barry Manilow for you. We got rain instead, which conforms to that song. I made it through the rain. And so I get to work, and the crew are already there. They were able, I guess there was like a shift manager who was there and was letting them in and got them all started. And I show up, and the manager's not there. She's a no-show. And I have no clue how to run the store. I've not been taught yet. And there are people working there who hate me and wish I were dead and gone. And so the shift manager, I'm assuming that's who she was, says she clocked out and left. And so we're shorthanded right before breakfast rush. You know, people come into work, they want to grab some coffee or, something to start their day. And we lose the shift manager, and we're already short-staffed. Then the guy who's in charge of cooking the food, he had cooked a whole ton of food. And it would have been great if it were timed right. McDonald's has a policy that once the food reaches a certain time in the heater unit, that you have to throw it out, because you can't serve it to people. And so I then see this garbage bin full of all the food right before the rush. And he's telling me, the time, they ran out of time, we have to throw it away. And then the rush came. And then the rush lined up outside the doors. We couldn't handle it. Then after it seemed like an hour, the manager finally shows up and is all shocked and horrified. Does she take it out on her employees who have been there and knew how to do their job? No. They came after me. She had the director in the area, or whatever his position was. He came over and took me into the little office there and fired me. Wow. I've not been taught and trained in how to do the job. The manager didn't even show up, and you're firing me. Gotcha. What happened to do with me not being a Canadian and therefore not qualifying to go to the manager meeting in British Columbia within the next month, would it? As I now have a little family and have to drive home to let her know I got fired. And so I understand what it's like to be discriminated against based on my nationality. I saw a lot of other things up there in Canada as well, with the sexism and the racism. Canada is not as nice as they portray themselves, eh? And so I did manage to get into Lethbridge, obviously, because I graduated with a dual bachelor's and a minor. And the first semester I was there, I wanted to explore career fields. Still didn't know what I wanted to be, and decided to check out teaching. I learned immediately, as I get dirty looks from the teacher, as the class is full of women, I wasn't welcome there. I decided to check out sports therapy. Got dirty looks from the teacher, knew I wasn't welcome there either. There was a feminist movement back in those days who hated all men, and I immediately recognized that hatred, that I did not belong, and so I was discriminated based on my sex. So nationality, sex, yeah. A wonderful life in Canada. The news here in Utah had covered not too long ago the bust of businesses belonging to FLDS, an FLDS group. I'm not sure if it's related to the Allreds or what group it's related to, but busted them for financial crimes. And this is after, of course, that law that you shall not discriminate based on religion. Well, if they're FLDS, their business, therefore, is a religious-based business. And so why then are they going after them for their financial crimes when the biggest worldwide crime organization is headquartered right here in Salt Lake City, Utah? They made the law, as the majority of them were Mormons who made that law, thinking to protect the church, not thinking that they'd have to use it against the church. And instead are disregarding their own law to pursue other religious organizations, specifically one that branched off from Mormonism. And so, yes, as ex-Mormons, we all know the discrimination based on our having left the church that we receive, don't we, ex-Mormons? So just something to think about, as the church is able to get away with all their crimes because they control everything. Whereas everybody else, well, we're subjected to the law.